Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Handling Revisions in Revit. My name is John Atkinson. I'm an application engineer here at CTC. And today we're going to be covering revisions and dealing with them as far as they can be troublesome in your projects. They happen, every project has them. So in this session, we're going to teach you the most effective way of creating them, working with them, scheduling, and just all around dealing with revisions. So our learning objectives: how to create revisions, how to control revisions in your title blocks, and how to customize revision schedules. So as you may or may not know, in order to access the Sheet Issues / Revisions dialog box, go to your View tab, go to the Sheet Composition panel, and click on Revisions. So once we have that dialog box open, we have a number of columns in the dialog, and their sequence. This is something that it's always there. It's going to be numerical. We can't use it, but we can schedule it. We can't change it other than moving up or down. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then we have the revision number, which is dictated by our numbering. And that numbering can be numeric or alphabetical, or none. We also have the date in which we're going to issue. We have a description, so if you have ASI or PR or RFI or whatever it is you're sending it out, use a description, make it understandable. And then issued. This is a checkbox that if it is checked, that means no more revision clouds can be placed on that revision. And then issued to and issued by, both of which you can use to either indicate who's making the revision or who the revision is going to. I can also show you some ways that we can use that for additional information. And then how do we want to show the clouds? Do we want to show clouds and tags, or once the revision has been issued, do we just want to show the tags, or do we want to set it to none? Some of the other options over on the right hand side are add for add new revision, or delete one that's already there, numbering per project or by per sheet. I highly recommend leaving it as per project. I find it much less confusing for the people that are reviewing it to constantly look up a new number for each sheet. So I leave mine at per project. So the number one revision is always the number one revision. Then we also have some commands for rows. Do we want to move those up or down? Say if one of your revisions is getting issued before another one is actually completed, you can move that up in the sequence. And then also, if you have a couple of revisions that look like they're going to get issued at the same time, you can use merge up or merge down to get those merged together. Then we have numbering options. You can do numeric or alphanumeric. There's also some prefixes and suffixes that you can add to your numbering in order to make them align with your office standard. And we have arc length. defaults to 3/4 of an inch. I typically squeeze mine down to 1/2 an inch. This is project wide, so if you change it here, it's going to change all of your bubbles everywhere. And then simply adding revision clouds to your project. Go to your Annotate tab, select Revision Cloud, draw the revision in sketch mode, and then select the appropriate sequence that this is going to be assigned to. So if we look back, you can see we have revision sequence number 1. If we had multiples in there, it would be sequence 2, 3, or 4. Just make sure you're selecting the appropriate sequence. And then tag that cloud. And a note, if your clouds and tags are difficult to see, they usually default to a line weight 1. You can go into your object styles and beef them up to maybe 6 for the cloud, 3 for the tag, and then change the color. Make it a little more noticeable so that you can find those revision clouds in your project quite a bit easier. Now we're going to talk about showing those revisions on your sheets. So if your revision doesn't exist in any of the views on your sheet, you can force it. Once a revision is placed on a sheet, it's going to automatically populate the revision schedule. But if you don't have that particular revision on the sheet and you want it to show up in your title block, then open up the properties for the revision, click on Revisions on Sheet, the little Edit tab, put a checkbox in the revision you want to appear, and you're good to go. And then we're talking about editing the revision schedules themselves. In order to do that, you would edit the title block family, go in and select in the views the parameters and start shuffling those around. We can add or change parameters. However, you'll notice at the bottom, we can't actually add any new parameters except the parameters that already exist and are associated to revision schedules. But we can add calculated parameters. And at the end, I'll show you how we can utilize that. Modifying the number of visible rows, you can dictate how tall that revision schedule is going to be. I believe it defaults to variable. So if you have 100 revisions, that's going to be a very long revision schedule. Or you can set it to defined height, and that's going to just show the most recent revisions that appear on that sheet. You can also rotate it to be vertical or horizontal, and whether or not you want headers or titles to be shown. So editing the revision tags, a lot of firms might have their own way that they want these presented and not just using the numerical or alphanumerical values that appear under the numbering, but you can change it to maybe say issued by, using issued by as your PR, ASI, whatever it is that it's going to be issued for. And then you can edit the label. As you can see in the delta, I've got a number 1. That's my label. I select that, hit edit label, and I can pick which parameters I wanted to read. So we'll jump into Revit now. All right, and now that I'm in here, basically going to go back and review everything that we just talked about. I'm going to activate my view, double click or right click and say activate the view. go to my View tab, go to Sheet Composition panel, select Revisions, and then I can start adding additional revisions. And you'll see there numerical. I can change my numbering scheme. Maybe the first one I want to be alphanumeric or none. In this case, I want to keep it numeric, and then I'd put in my date, whatever that issue might be, revision number 1, 2, 3, however many we need. And I'm going to say issue, revision 1 has already been issued. Or we can add an ASI to it and then select issue, and you notice that grays out. I'm just going to say OK. Go to my Annotate tab. Revision Cloud puts me in sketch mode with the rectangle already selected. So I'll zoom in. I'll say this area right here. You can see it's on sequence 8, or the last one I created. I'll go ahead and try and put that on 1. But being that sequence 1 has already been issued, I can't do anything with it. So I'll choose it 2. Say OK. And then tag by category. And you can see that the bubbles themselves are pretty big, and it's actually pretty hard to read. So I'm going to go back into my revisions. I can make my changes here, or I can move this one down, put it at number 3, even though it's still called revision 2. The description's not going to matter. And I say OK, that's going to immediately update my tag. We can also set our revisions under show to be tag. That gets rid of the bubble. It's still here. If I hover over it, I can still select it and find it. It's just not visible at the moment. Or if I don't want any of my previous revisions to be visible, I can set it to none, and all that information goes away. Now again, if I want to edit the visibility, because this pen weight's pretty difficult to see, I'll go to my Manage tab, Object Styles, Annotation Objects, go down to Revisions. Here's my revision clouds. I'll set that to 6, and under the color, I'll go with magenta. Tags we'll set to 3, and we'll do the same thing with the color there. Now that becomes project wide. I can easily find those on a sheet when I'm working. Let's see. And if I go back to View, Revisions, under the numeric options, we can start our sequence anywhere we'd like them to be. We could start at 3, and we could add a prefix or a suffix and say OK, and that's going to start my revision numbers at ASI number 3. This is a little limiting if you have several different types of revisions that you issue, proposal requests or additional information, and that's going to update my tag. In that case, I don't necessarily want to do a prefix. Set it back to 1, everything goes back. But if I go into the alphanumeric tab, we can start our sequence and say A, B, C, D all the way through, taking out O and I if that's our office standard, and again offering that prefix suffix. And we can change those to alphanumeric, and that one goes to A. The next number starts right after that. So 1, A, 2. If I changed 3 to alphanumeric, revision 3 would shift down, and I would have an A and a B. Arc length, if I move this over a little bit so you can see, if I change this to 0.5 inches, it quickly changes my entire project, not just this one arc or bubble. All right, and then if we want to, you'll notice in my title block, as soon as I add that revision, it immediately starts populating my revision table. If I create another one, I'm going to set this one to revision 4. I'm going to do this area over here, finish, tag, and you can see that one's tagged B. And it starts populating my revision schedule. So if we want to maybe have those ASIs or PRs all in the same schedule, there's a couple of ways that we can do that. The first thing would be to edit our title block. Here's my revision schedule. I could double click this and open up a schedule editing mode, I guess you might call it, with all of my information up here at the top for column sizing and borders. Now we hit the drop down and select the schedule, revision schedule in the drop down. And this gives me the same options that I would have with a normal schedule, with the exception of filter. This is also available under views, schedules, revision schedule. Now, if I take a look at fields, you'll see I have revision number, description, date, and sequence. And under appearance, you'll notice, formatting, you'll notice that revision sequence is a hidden field. We could show that if we want, but over here on the left, I have issued by and issued to, and I can't add any additional parameters. So I'm going to select revision number, push issued by over to the right, and then under formatting, I'm going to hide my revision number, and I'm going to change my heading for issued by to number. Say OK. You can see it changed. We can load this into our project, overwrite. You can see it's going to go blank. But if I go into my revisions and say on revision 2, I change this issued to ASI 28, was issued by. Great. Okay, and apply. There we go. Now for my tag, in order for that to read the same, I have to do the same thing. Edit that tag, select the label, edit that, and say issued by, throw that over. I can remove that revision number, say OK. If I wanted to, I can change this to be some piece of text. And I can also change the shape of this to be a hexagon or whatever your standard is. Load that in, overwrite, and you'll see now I have ASI 28 for revision 2. And my revision B is blank. And that one's going to be ASI 29 or PR. Say OK. That's going to start updating my column in my revision schedule. And if PR 15 goes out before ASI 28, I can move that up in the timeline and show it there. I'm going to change this one here. Okay, and issue, apply, and OK. Now I've got only 2 revision clouds showing up over here, but if I come over to my properties, go to revisions on sheets and select that, I can force it to show revision number 1 and have that automatically populate. Some of the other options you can do when you're in the family edit mode, we can select the schedule and rotate that clockwise or counterclockwise in order to get those columns to read up or down. Or you can set it to none. Just put it back where it was. A few other things that I mentioned on our fields. We can do sorting and grouping. You can sort them by the revision sequence or any of the parameters that we've included in the fields. Under appearance, the height, this is where we would say user defined or is it variable. If it's set to variable, it's going to show all of the revisions either on that sheet or checked to be shown on that sheet. User defined, that means we can decide how tall this is by grabbing that little grip on the bottom. So I can take it up to 2, 3, 4, 5. Load that into the project, update it, there it is. Now if I'm in here, I can show all of my revisions on that sheet. I've got 8 of them. I don't have nearly enough room, but it's going to show me ASI all the way back to PR 15, but I don't see my number 1. So if I uncheck number 8, my revision is going to show up. So that's how we can easily control those images back and forth, or the revisions on the schedule on the sheet. So that's it. And we do have some upcoming sessions. We've got some P&ID if you're into mechanical. We also have infrastructure parts for Civil 3D and airflow with Dynamo. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that came in. In Revit 2017, can 0 be used in the numeric revision sequence? I do not believe so. We can take a look real quick. View, revisions, alphanumeric, starting sequence, 0. So we can start at 0. Do the tags inherit the cloud line work, color, thickness if it is changed in object styles? It will be overridden by the object styles. So if you've done that, as far as I know, other than the tag line work, the revision, we cannot change the revision cloud, but we can change the tags, but I believe that's going to be overridden by the object styles in that hierarchy of overrides. If I add a paragraph of information to the revision schedule, will expand to include the full paragraph? Good question. Let's try it out. Let's add just a forced return using Control Enter and say apply. Number 4. Now, let's say OK. And I'm going to uncheck a few of these. Yes. Can you use this to issue a complete set of drawings for review without having the revision cloud in any drawings? You can, yes. As long as you have that show in revision schedule checked for the sheet, it's going to appear there. You won't have any clouds visible on in your project. And can you force a revision to show on all sheets at one time? Here, let's add a couple of sheets. New sheets. No views on them, but I can do a shift select, come down here, and I don't have that option to edit the revisions on the sheet. I can pick one at a time and come down and I get that revisions on sheet. I would have to do that separately. So no. Can you include DD and CD issue dates in the revision schedule? If you add and rename the issued to, issued by columns, you could add different dates. Because the columns are nothing more than a text value. If you rename the header, it'll make sense to you. You would just have to realize that that information is going to get placed here or here or here. Any other questions? Then how to number this DD/CD? You may want to have additional revisions with additional dates. I suppose I could edit my schedule and add my additional field in here at the bottom. And I could change that to say DD date, and this one maybe CD date, something like that. And then load into project, drop that in. So now I have two dates, but I would have to realize that if I want these to be populated, I have to go into view, because we still can't add additional parameters. I would have to come into my issued to, and I'm going to open up this one. There we go. So now I've got a DD date. Uncheck that. Back that one off, and just understand that it's set up like that. Can you select all revisions and delete them, or by revision date? So I'm going to duplicate this one down here, and I can do a select all instances, and it's not available here, and delete them, or I'd have to select them individually, or I can go to my view tab, go to my revisions. I know that that's revision B, and delete it. Wait, was that B? No, it was 4. Revisions 4. Delete that. And deleting it will remove all the revisions and the associated clouds and tags. So they immediately went away and it removed out of there. All right, everyone. That's the last of the questions. So thank you for watching. Have a great afternoon.